the obvious thing would be to talk about China here, but let's not do the obvious thing. Let's talk about Brazil, and I'm sure China will come up in the course of talking about Brazil. So I know Brazil's always on your mind, I think, because you have a little crush on Brazil as a country. But what's on your mind about Brazil right now?
It's true. Well, when are the elections? In 2 weeks?
The
It's coming
first
up.
round, yeah, the first round are in 2 weeks.
All right. So this is topical. It's not just me, indulging my love affair with Brazil.
Oh no, not at all.
Um, the thing that caught my eye about Brazil, as I mentioned last week, was the economic data coming out on economic activity booming. So the economic activity index, which comes out monthly in Brazil, is at its highest level since 2013. So that's a real departure from what people think about Brazil right now and what people perceive to be the situation in the country. So I think the interesting thing about Brazil right now, and I've done some digging into this over the last few days, just to really think carefully about what's going on, because I haven't looked at this in a while. But it's pretty extraordinary what's happening in Brazil, and I want to flag this, and we can bookmark it and come back to it in more depth in the future conversations. But I'm going to say right here, after doing this recent round of work, I come away much, much more bullish on Brazil than I was 2 weeks ago. And we've talked about being concerned because obviously we're very cautious on what's happening in China and the Chinese housing-driven, fixed asset investment model and demand for commodities and all that. I'm less worried about that when it comes to Brazil than I was. And let me tell you why. Something's happening in Brazil, and it's not about commodities, because if you look at the actual mining sector of Brazil, it's basically gone nowhere for the last 5 years. It's totally kind of crapped out at a low level. And the same for food. Food prices are obviously high. It's been a help, but that's not the story either. The story in Brazil has been services. And when you look at that overall economic activity indicator booming back to 2013 levels, it's not ag and it's not commodities, it's services that's driving it. And that's really, really intriguing. I'm not sure exactly what's causing that. And I have some theories, though, because this is why it's helpful to do sort of bottom-up, micro, deep work, because one of the themes we've been really exploring deeply on the equity side has been the changing financial situation in Brazil, so financial technology. And Brazil has been a fintech powerhouse. So there's e-banks, there's the Pix payment system, which has absolutely taken over the entire country. It's been transformational. And if you're involved in markets, you're involved in the global economy, and you don't know what Pix is, you have to go look this up right now, because this is a huge development. Pix is essentially the government-backed payment protocol that makes person-to-person and person-to-business payments effectively instantaneous and extremely low cost. And that appears to be having a major impact on what's happening in Brazil. So I said this was topical, and just today, the Brazilian central bank came out and they kept interest rates unchanged at 13.75%. So think about how high that is. And they signaled that they might be, more hawkish. They're watching inflation very carefully, and but essentially, it's the end of the rate hiking cycle. And I think it's interesting to look. The last time interest rates were 13.75% was all the way back in 2015, when things were really going off the rails in Brazil, and the economy was in a deep recession. So this was like, right around post-commodity boom. This was Odebrecht, Lava Jato, everything starting to blow up, all of that stuff. And the difference between now and then is shocking in terms of interest rates that individual households pay, that businesses pay on everything. So Brazil has always been famous for having this huge cost of capital. this huge cost of doing business because money was very dear there all the time. And that's really changed. So if you look at the spread, and I don't want to get too technical and wonky here, but the spread between the central bank's rate at 13.75% and what consumers pay on credit cards, what businesses pay for working capital, was enormously wide back in 2015, the last time we were here. So if you look at, for example, people were paying 60% on their credit cards back in 2015. Today, with interest rates at the same place, they're paying 20%. Businesses were paying 30% for working capital back in 2015. So in other words, if you had receivables in your business, you're waiting to get paid, and you had to finance those, you would have to pay 30% to get the money now instead of waiting to be paid by your customer. Today, it's 18%. And I know that's a lot of numbers and it's really boring, but that's a revolution in the cost of doing business, and you can see it in the surge of services activity. Something really good is happening in Brazil, in the ordinary small business everyday part of Brazil, and that is very much being overlooked because everyone is focused on commodities. Everyone's focused on volley and iron ore and soybeans, and those things are still important, but this is the thing to really focus on, I think.